Tonight at 10, a new Conservative leader is elected. Liz Truss will be appointed Prime Minister tomorrow. By a smaller margin than many had expected, she defeated Rishi Sunak to become Britain's third female Prime Minister, promising to deliver on pledges.
I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver.
As the cost of living hits crisis levels, with fuel bills breaking new records, Labour says the Conservatives are out of ideas, regardless of who's Prime Minister.
You know, after 12 years of a Tory government, what have we got to show for it? People not being able to pay their bills, an NHS on its knees, and law and order completely broken down.
Tomorrow, Downing Street will host two Prime Ministers, Boris Johnson in the morning, Liz Truss in the afternoon.
Yes, and we'll be asking what kind of Prime Minister Liz Truss is likely to be and what kind of government she's likely to lead. Also tonight. In Canada, police are searching for two men suspected of killing 10 people in a remote northern area. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are back in the UK, where Meghan has been addressing a leadership summit for young people.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, Britain's Cameron Norrie is out of the US Open, beaten in the last 16 by Andrei Rublev in straight sets.
Good evening. The new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the fourth in the space of 6 years, will be Liz Truss, who earlier today was elected leader of the Conservative Party to succeed Boris Johnson. She will be formally appointed tomorrow when the Queen invites her to form a government. Ms Truss, whose margin of victory over the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak was less emphatic than many had predicted, has already pledged to take action within days to deal with surging fuel prices. Let's take a look at the result. Liz Truss taking 57% of the valid votes that were cast by Conservative Party members. Rishi Sunak took 43%. Now, this 57% is interesting because it's frankly a less impressive winning share than Boris Johnson had in 2019. He had 66%, and even less impressive again than David Cameron back in 2005. He took 68%, so a big difference. We'll be asking what kind of Prime Minister Liz Truss is likely to be and how she's likely to tackle the cost of living crisis along with several other challenges. We start with this report by our political editor, Chris Mason.
Liz Truss arrived as Foreign Secretary and would leave as tomorrow's Prime Minister. The final act of the contest to replace Boris Johnson, the outcome. Inside, an expectant crowd after a long campaign awaits the candidates.
Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss.
And then, the result.
I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
The words to follow her winning in the hands of her husband, a clear victory, but not a landslide.
Thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply.
And she concluded with the mantra her campaign began with.
We will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
Elation, smiles and success, the crowning moment of her political career. Liz Truss will be Prime Minister tomorrow and then confronted by an in-tray from hell. The question for her party and for the country, will she be up to it?
I think she'll be an absolutely fantastic Prime Minister. So, yeah, I'm really, really pleased.
Bluntly, it's a tough time, isn't it, to become Prime Minister?
We have some huge challenges. We have still the COVID backlog situation to deal with, the economic shocks that we're going through now, in part because of our stance we've taken on Ukraine, and many other challenges.
What do you say to our viewers? Says, look, the razzmatazz is all fine, but when are we going to get this detail on energy? Because people are looking at their bills and they're frightened.
Well, look, I think as we've just seen, Liz Truss in her acceptance speech made it clear she wants to get that done. She wants to deliver on that quickly, as she said, I think, on the BBC even yesterday. So I think people will see fairly quickly, actually, a package of measures that she wants to put forward.
What next, though, for the man defeated?
The priority now has got to be to get behind Liz Truss, our new leader, and she will have my full support as the new Conservative government gets on with delivering for the British people.
If you're offered a job in Liz Truss's cabinet, would you accept?
You know, that's not what I'm focused on. And what I can say is that Liz Truss will have my full support as the new government gets on with delivering for people.
Full support, but you're not willing to serve her?
Well, it's just these things that, A, they're not for me, but also it's just not something I'm thinking about.
The main opposition parties here at Chipper, today's focus is on a new government, but the Liberal Democrats are revitalised, the SNP remain dominant in Scotland, and Labour are ahead in the polls.
Well, we've heard far more from the latest Prime Minister about cuts to corporation tax over the summer than we have about the cost of living crisis, the single most important thing that's bearing down on so many millions of households.
The UK is in probably the worst and most acute crisis of our lifetime. So the responsibility on her, because she holds the powers and the resources needed to respond to this crisis, is huge.
No plan to deal with the rising energy bills, the rocketing food bills, the crisis of the NHS. And that's deeply alarming.
The challenges ahead, huge. The challenges now, rather more practical. Things don't get any bigger at Westminster than when the removal vans turn up in Downing Street. Tomorrow, it'll be Liz Truss's turn, swapping her party headquarters for number 10.
So on the eve of Liz Truss's appointment as Prime Minister, we're going to go live to Downing Street and we're going to talk to Chris Mason there. Chris, when people put the question to you bluntly, what kind of Prime Minister is Liz Truss going to be? What is the reply?
Well, on the face of it, Huw, things are going to feel rather different. Boris Johnson was a Prime Minister who wore his conservatism pretty lightly, almost a baggy approach to how he would approach things, all things to all people. Liz Truss gives the indication of having a spine of conviction. She's talked about a smaller state, a leaner government during the campaign, and yet, when you look at her track record, and this has been well reported over the summer, there has been flux. The Liberal Democrat who became a Conservative, the Brexiteer, the Remainer who became a Brexiteer. Even over the summer, we saw her going from saying that there would be no handouts to the prospect in a couple of days of a whopping great state intervention on energy bills. And voters, the electorate, are going to get to know Liz Truss in office as Prime Minister. Yes, she's held high office here at Westminster for 10 years, but the broader electorate won't have seen a great deal of what she actually stands for. We're going to learn that in government and how she approaches it. Is it that spine of conviction, or is there compromise forced upon her by reality, by circumstance, by her own party or by others? Well, we're soon going to see.
Chris, we'll talk about the likely shape of the government a little later on in the programme, but thanks for now. Chris Mason there, outside number 10 for us. Well, as Chris was saying, it's quite difficult to know where to start when it comes to the challenges and the problems that Liz Truss will have to tackle when she is appointed by the Queen tomorrow. The huge backlog in the National Health Service, funding for social care, the conflict in Ukraine. The most pressing, we think, of course, is the rising cost of living. And we say that because that is what voters are saying. That is what people across the UK are saying. The prospect of unaffordable energy bills for so many households and businesses going into winter. Liz Truss has promised action within a week in this area. We'll discuss that in just a moment. First, our economics editor Faisal Islam looks at the scale of the broad economic challenge.
This is what an energy shock looks like in practice. Households facing mortgage-sized monthly direct debits and small businesses facing a wave of incredible invoices for the renewal of energy contracts, circulating these bills on social media with a message that there's no way to pay. At this local community centre, rising prices are ramping up demand for food banks at the same time as cutting off the surplus stocks of food that they depend on.
This morning I was talking to one guy who said he wants to go back to prison because he was struggling to be out and look at with his own flat. Another woman who's turned a gas boiler completely off, boiling a kettle for hot water. Others not being able to use medical machinery that's sort of helping them breathe at night because they're frightened of the cost of how much it would cost to run that machine.
The typical inflation-adjusted cost of energy bills has for decades been about £1,000 per year. It's heading to 3 or 4 times that, perhaps as high as £5,000 to £6,000 next year. This, though, is a chart from one of the industry plans to freeze bills. It shows the future path for average bills with the big spike this year and next before prices come down. It proposes smoothing this year's hump by freezing bills at the £2,000 level and recouping the money spent on the freeze over a decade or so, only slowly declining from that current £2,000 level into the 2030s. That would require an upfront fund to pay for the gas already purchased of about £90 billion, backed in some form by the taxpayer.
This is a war footing, to my mind. And when we look at what we borrowed during the First and Second World Wars, we're not talking about anything on that scale, but it is a very big number. I accept that, and it will affect the government borrowing.
This Staffordshire firm manufactures agricultural fencing, which requires galvanising the steel at 450 degrees. That takes incredible amounts of gas.
From an energy perspective, I do think something needs to happen. They need to step in and put a stopgap.
And what happens if it doesn't?
I presume that the costs are just going to spiral, and consumer mindsets and investment strategy are going to definitely get hit. There's only so much as a business we can carry, and to remain successful and profitable, we'd have to hand that cost on to our customers ultimately.
It's difficult to imagine a more troubling economic in-tray for an incoming Prime Minister, with the problems affecting everywhere from industry to ordinary households. And Liz Truss's solutions to the Conservative membership centred upon free market answers, from cutting taxes to drilling more oil and gas. The problem is that in the key market concerned, energy, the market isn't functioning, the gas isn't flowing, and that suggests that a more drastic government solution is inevitable. It was here in this county that Liz Truss began the task of defeating Rishi Sunak, but in the intervening 6 weeks, the situation on the ground and in the financial markets has become materially worse. Faisal Islam, BBC News in Staffordshire.
Let's stay on this theme, because the search for solutions to the cost of living crisis and the energy prices in particular is work in progress right now for the Truss team, and our business editor Simon Jack has been finding out more about this. What do we know?
The bosses of the energy companies have been meeting this evening to thrash out the details of a plan we expect to be announced on Wednesday, which, as Faisal was saying, would be a massive government intervention, whereby the energy companies would borrow tens of billions of pounds backed by government guarantees to lower the cost and use that money to reduce, lower or even freeze bills. Now, Scottish Power, who came up with the first iteration of this, think that to freeze bills at current levels for this winter and next would cost, as he said, £90 billion. But that doesn't include business. That's just domestic. Now, I understand that there are plans to include businesses, small businesses at first, in that plan, because remember, they are coming up for their renewals. Often they renew in October. They're comparing their bills to this time last year. So they're seeing bill increase of a multiple of 4, 5, 10 sometimes. It could see thousands go bust or lay off thousands of staff. They could be waved in. That could push the price of this whole package above £100 billion, even more than we spent on furlough, which is around 60 to 70 billion. How is the government going to treat that? What they would like to do is keep it off the books, to say we're not doing the borrowing, we're just doing the guaranteeing. But most people I speak to say there is no doubt that the government is on the hook for some of this. If people can't pay, businesses go bust. They are exposed to this, so they won't be able to do it. The person tipped to be next Chancellor has always said we're prepared to do some fiscal loosening. When you add this to the tax cut pledges and the spending pledges on things like defence, fiscal loosening is code for borrowing a ton of additional money.
OK, Simon, many thanks again. Simon Jack, our business editor, with the latest thoughts on what's likely and what's not likely. Well, what about the rather winding path that has brought Liz Truss to number 10? As we heard a short while ago from Chris, at one stage she was a Liberal Democrat. She switched to the Conservatives, entered Parliament in 2010 as the MP for South West Norfolk. She was for many years completely committed to Britain's membership of the European Union, but after the Brexit vote she then changed her mind and said she'd been wrong about that. She's held various cabinet positions, including Justice Secretary, most recently Foreign Secretary. Our Deputy Political Editor Vicky Young has the story so far of the politician who's now set to be Britain's third female Prime Minister.
She's a grafter. She means what she says, she knows what she wants and she gets it.
These are some of Liz Truss's most supportive friends. Activists in her Norfolk constituency have nothing but praise for their MP, the next Prime Minister.
The job is so important to her, getting done what she wants to get done.
She's got the skin of a rhinoceros when it comes to putting up with people having a go at her, I can assure you.
Several times over the years, colleagues have predicted that Liz Truss's career was on a downward path, that she'd soon be spending more time here in Norfolk than in Westminster. But friends say she's always been underestimated, and her survival is evidence of a clever politician with a steely determination.
Her political journey has taken her from a family she describes as left-wing, where she joined her parents in the campaign for unilateral nuclear disarmament, to Oxford University, where she was a Liberal Democrat and took to the conference stage to argue in favour of abolishing the monarchy.
We Liberal Democrats believe in opportunity for all. We believe in fairness and common sense.
After graduating, she joined the Conservatives, worked as an accountant and was selected to fight the safe Tory seat of South West Norfolk. But her political career was almost derailed when news emerged of an affair with an MP. She fought off attempts to oust her and was elected to Parliament in 2010. She was quickly promoted, first to Education Minister. Someone who's known her since university says her underlying beliefs haven't changed.
I think she's likely to put quite a lot of noses out of joint. I think she might well upset quite a few people. But if you're looking for some bold leadership and direction over the coming weeks and years, she might just provide it. Whether it's to your taste, well, that's a different matter. But you'll know what the taste is with Liz Truss unambiguously.
Her first cabinet job was Environment Secretary. It was obvious, though, that some work would be needed on her presentational skills.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
Liz.
When the Brexit referendum was called, she campaigned to stay in the EU, something she later said was wrong. Nicola Horlick, a Liberal Democrat, was part of that Remain team.
For somebody to say, you know, I had this conviction about one thing and the next day actually I was wrong about that and I've now got a different conviction, when it seems that that's just about getting power, that really concerns me.
You don't agree with Liz Truss on lots of things. Do you think she's got any qualities that would make her a decent Prime Minister?
You've got this person who's very disciplined, very well organised, but is lacking on the communication and charisma side.
But friends say she does know how to get her message across, and her Instagram posts show her playful side. Ruder colleagues think her love of a photo opportunity betrays a superficiality. She was certainly mocked for this regal pose last Christmas. Her promotion to Foreign Secretary has given her a global platform. Some think there are less than subtle echoes of Margaret Thatcher, a comparison she loves. Liz Truss will be Britain's third female Prime Minister. Life for her, her husband and 2 daughters is about to change, and no one's underestimating the challenges that lie ahead. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Liz Truss was criticised, certainly during the leadership campaign, for dismissing the First Minister of Scotland as an attention seeker. But Nicola Sturgeon said tonight she would attempt to build a good working relationship with Liz Truss despite their political differences. The new Prime Minister will also have to deal with the Scottish Government's determination to hold an independence referendum next year. And in Northern Ireland, well, the challenges include sorting out the trading arrangements in the wake of Brexit. Let's hear from our correspondents then in Edinburgh, Cardiff and first, Belfast.
There's 2 clear political challenges for the new Prime Minister here. To try to fix the issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol, the post-Brexit trading arrangements which have been so divisive, and to restore a power-sharing government at this rather empty building behind me. The Democratic Unionist Party has said it won't go back into government unless those Brexit arrangements, which have created new checks on goods coming from Britain, are scrapped or significantly changed. And Liz Truss has put through controversial legislation to override our agreement with the EU to try to achieve that. It may get the DUP back round the table, but that course of action is opposed by a majority of Stormont's politicians. It could take a year and risks retaliation from the EU. Meanwhile, of course, having no government here affects Northern Ireland in multiple ways. Most urgently, it means there's less help for families who are struggling with the cost of living crisis.
Liz Truss's biggest challenge here in Wales as Tory leader will be holding on to all those seats that turned from red to blue at the last general election. Buoyed by support for Brexit, Boris Johnson returned the highest number of MPs since 1983, but many of those seats are held by very thin margins. When she becomes Prime Minister tomorrow, she'll need to decide if she wants to reset the broken relationship between Westminster and the Welsh Labour government here at the Senedd. Mark Drakeford, the First Minister, talking about spending months without talking to Boris Johnson. Earlier this year, the UK government was accused of disrespecting devolution by threatening to overturn a Senedd law on trade union action. The First Minister has tweeted his congratulations, saying it's time for them to work together. But will Liz Truss engage with the Labour leader she described as a low-energy Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, Nicola Sturgeon and Liz Truss actually grew up for a while pretty close to each other. There's just 20 miles or so between the two primary schools they attended in the west of Scotland. But these days, politically, they are worlds apart. During the campaign, Ms Truss dismissed Ms Sturgeon as an attention seeker who she said would be best ignored. She also talked tough on the Constitution, saying she would not allow another referendum on independence in any circumstances. Ms Sturgeon, well, she hit back, saying that if Ms Truss governed as she campaigned, it would be a disaster. Now, with the campaign over, the incoming Prime Minister's strategy of muscular unionism is going to be put to the test. Will it work, or will it, as her opponents in the SNP hope, and some of her supporters in the Tories in Scotland fear, actually backfire and lead to an increase in support for independence? Her first test here, as elsewhere in the country, may come with the cost of living crisis. Helping people with their bills may not be sufficient to win over Scottish hearts and minds, but it could well be necessary.
That was James Cook there, ending that sequence in Edinburgh, and of course we had Emma in Belfast and Howell in Cardiff. You can find out more about Liz Truss, her background, her journey to number 10 on BBC News Online, and of course you can also access the same material on the BBC News app. Let's have a look at some of the day's other news. Police in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan have charged 2 men with murder after 10 people were stabbed to death. At least 18 people were injured in attacks across 13 locations in the remote Indigenous community of James Smith Cree Nation and nearby Weldon. The suspects, who are still at large, were last seen in the provincial capital of Regina, from where our correspondent Jessica Murphy reports now.
It was early on Sunday morning that Saskatchewan police received the first report of a stabbing in the Indigenous community of James Smith Cree Nation. Soon, more reports came in, with victims also at the nearby village of Weldon.
He said, I need somebody to take me to the hospital. My mouth has been hurt. He said, I've been stabbed.
Police have named Damien Sanderson and Miles Sanderson as the suspects behind the attack in the 2 small communities in central Saskatchewan.
Their location and direction of travel is unknown. This is why we need everyone in the province to stay vigilant and report any suspicious activity.
The suspects were last spotted here in the provincial capital of Regina, about 300 kilometres south of where the attacks took place. The police have charged the 2 men with several counts, including first-degree murder.
Canada's Prime Minister has offered his condolences on one of the worst mass killings in Canadian history.
My thoughts and the thoughts of all Canadians are with those who've lost loved ones and with those who are injured. This kind of violence, or any kind of violence, has no place in our country.
We still don't know much about the victims, though police have said some attacks appeared to be random. Jessica Murphy, BBC News, Regina.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have appeared on stage in Manchester at a global summit for young people. Meghan has been involved with the One Young World project since 2014 and gave a keynote address. It's the couple's first visit to the UK since the Queen's Platinum Jubilee in early June. Our correspondent Judith Morris reports.
As crowds go, this one was well warmed up before the headline act arrived.
Please welcome Meghan and Harry.
And if the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were hoping for a positive reception, they got it. Young delegates from more than 200 countries watched Meghan make her first speech in the UK since the couple moved to California.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is very nice to be back in the UK.
She talked about how parenthood has changed her.
I was now married, and I was now a mom. Seeing the global community through the eyes of my child, and I would ask, what is this world he would come to adopt? And what can we do? What can I do to make it better? I am thrilled that my husband is able to join me here this time, to be able to see and witness firsthand my respect for this organization, this incredible organization, and all that it provides as well as accomplishes.
This event has been carefully chosen by the Duchess of Sussex. She has a long connection with the organisation behind it, but it also means that she's speaking to an international rather than solely a British audience.
Security around the event was arranged privately. Prince Harry's currently embroiled in a legal dispute with the Home Office about the downgrading of his police protection. The couple did get up close and personal with a few of those on stage, including Halima Aden, a Somali-American model who was born in a refugee camp.
I look up to her as a young black woman myself. I feel like she's paving the way for a lot of women.
You got a selfie?
And I got my selfie. I'm a happy trooper. She approached me, so I was like, I gotta shoot my shot. It's now or never. Like, how often do you get to meet Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? So I was having a little fangirl moment. Got my selfie in, and I'm so happy.
The Sussexes will hope for a similarly warm reception for the rest of their trip. For now, though, the selfie tells the story. Smiles all round. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
Right, let's have a little more then on the main story. It's 27 minutes past 10. The election of Liz Truss as Conservative leader, and from tomorrow, the new UK Prime Minister. She'll be heading to Balmoral, the Queen's residence in Aberdeenshire, where she'll be formally invited to form a government. Then back to London and her address in Downing Street as Prime Minister, the first address there. After that, the first cabinet appointments expected to be confirmed, we think, within a few hours' time. And then Wednesday will bring Liz Truss's first appearance at Prime Minister's Questions, and there she'll be facing Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader of the opposition. And she has promised immediate action, judging by today's speech there in Westminster, on tackling energy bills in the first week of taking office. And now the task, of course, is to communicate beyond the party members to tens of millions of voters at a time when so many households and businesses are dealing with a period of great uncertainty. Now, Peterborough in Cambridgeshire was won by the Conservatives from Labour at the last election in 2019. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning has spent the day there.
They want the cuts now, to energy bills, to tax rates, to rising prices.
I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Hopefully she would maybe make some differences to people's lives, because I think people are very worried at the moment, not just people in everyday life, but obviously as small business owners, we are very worried about what is coming next.
At the salon she owns, the challenges are overwhelming. Joe, an undecided voter, knew little about Liz Truss, but now expects much of her.
What do you want to hear from the new Prime Minister in the first week?
I want her to back up what she said that she's going to do. So the VAT cuts would be great, and the national insurance. Those things are going to make a massive difference.
There's some talk that she's going to freeze energy bills. Is that something you would welcome?
Yeah, I think anybody would welcome it. I think not just domestically, we all want to know what we're paying out every single month, but as a business we need that also. We are a business that uses a lot of electricity, unfortunately.
Liz Truss started her Tory leadership campaign here in Peterborough, winning by appealing to Tory party members. But now she has to reach out to every voter in this marginal and in others hit by price rises to persuade them she should stay as Prime Minister. The scale of her task at the fishy business, they're not even sure they will have a business soon.
At the moment our gas bill is just over £500 a month. It's going to be over £6,000 a month, which is just, that means we're going to have to close the door. We simply cannot afford to pay that. She's got a lot of work ahead of her, and really need her to prove to me what she's going to do to help me keep the doors open on my business and help my customers in the local community. She needs to prove herself to get my vote in the next election.
Even her supporters worry they still don't know her plans to tackle rising prices.
I voted for her, so I'm definitely glad that she won. I just hope that many of the tax cuts come as soon as possible. Liz Truss, when she was Foreign Secretary, she did a brilliant job, and I have a lot of respect for her for that. However, I do have a lot of issues with some of her economic policies.
The worry is real, from staying in business to keeping warm. The fourth Prime Minister in 6 years, facing voter demands for immediate and bold action. Lucy Manning, BBC News, Peterborough.
Just a selection of voices there from Peterborough. Let's have a final word from Westminster tonight with our political editor, Chris Mason. Chris, what does tomorrow bring?
So first thing tomorrow, Huw, as we're having our Rice Krispies at breakfast time, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, still the Prime Minister tonight, still the Prime Minister tomorrow morning, will come out here and give his valedictory address. Expect him to call on the Conservatives to unite behind Liz Truss. And then we have constitutional ritual garnished with a bit of geography, with that dash to Aberdeenshire, to Balmoral, for the outgoing Prime Minister to resign and the incoming Prime Minister to say that she can form a government. Liz Truss will then return here to Downing Street, and around about tea time she will give her speech from the same spot, framing the premiership that will follow, and then she'll appoint her cabinet. News tonight as to the machinations going on behind the scenes as far as that is concerned. In just the last couple of minutes, Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, confirming that she will resign in the morning. She was asked to stay on, I understand, as Culture Secretary, and said no after a difficult weighing up of the decision. She will return to writing books. We heard earlier in the evening that Priti Patel, the current Home Secretary, will also resign as Boris Johnson himself resigns. It'll then be up to Liz Truss to formulate that government, and just the news I've brought you there, coupled with wranglings, for instance, over who the new Northern Ireland Secretary will be, with some people saying that they don't want that job and others absolutely clamouring for it but not being offered it, gives you some sense that assembling a government is hard, as well as running one.
Indeed, Chris, thanks very much. More pieces of the jigsaw, no doubt, to be announced tomorrow. Chris Mason there, our political editor, just turned 10:30. Let's have a look at the weather and what's it going to be like tomorrow, not just in Balmoral, but in Downing Street as well, Louise.
Well, let's hope it's nothing like what we've got at the moment, because it's all kicking off, Huw, I tell you. This was last night. If you had difficulty sleeping, it's not surprising, because last night we had over 36,000 lightning strikes. But just take a look at this. Over the last few hours, this has been developing across the southwest. Look at the thunderstorms moving up through Cornwall and across Wales, and they're heading towards the Midlands. We're also going to see another cluster of thunderstorms here in the southeast that could as well keep you awake over the next few hours. So those thunderstorms, they're all going to move their way steadily northwards overnight tonight, pushing their way into the Midlands, across the north of England, and eventually into southern Scotland. The thunder may start to ease, but those showers will linger in Scotland. Quieter behind, a little bit of patchy mist and fog forming maybe. An incredibly mild night for the time of year. Widespread double digits to greet us first thing tomorrow morning. But there will be some showers in Scotland. Quieter elsewhere, some sunshine first thing. Get out and about if you can, because as we go through the day, the showers once again developing in the southwest, some of them in sort of organised bands. So if you get some, they really could be heavy, widespread, with hail, with thunder mixed in there. Not all of us will see those showers, yes. If you do catch them, they really are going to be intense. But the best of the sunshine, the best of the warmth again across East Anglia, 24 Celsius. Now the low pressure is with us, and it's set to stay throughout the week. It is going to drift its way a little bit further eastwards as we go into Wednesday. And that means that the showers are going to be fairly widespread spread, but really quite random. So sunshine and showers on Wednesday. Don't go too far without an umbrella because it's going to be very difficult to predict exactly where we're going to see them. A little bit fresher as well on Wednesday. I can offer you some good news if you're after some drier weather. Yes, we start off with some rain and that'll linger into eastern areas, but maybe by Friday, signs of something a little bit drier and quieter for the weekend. Huw.
OK, Louise, thanks very much again. Louise there with the latest on the weather. That's BBC News at 10 on Monday, September the 5th. More analysis of the day's main stories, of course, plenty of it. Newsnight and Victoria Derbyshire in charge. They're already on air on BBC Two. And here on BBC One, well, all my colleagues in the nations and regions are waiting to deliver the news where you are. But from all of us on the 10 team, thanks for watching and good night.